Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our latest stories. The dust stirred and danced beneath the gentle glow of the early morning sun, each tiny particle catching the light as it rose slowly from the earth like wisps of smoke escaping from the embers of a dying fire. At the heart of a vast training enclosure ringed by heavy-duty fencing and thick steel gates reinforced for security, a giant German shepherd paced restlessly in endless circles. His coat, once sleek and shimmering with rich black and deep tan hues, had lost its luster, now appearing coarse and weathered. His eyes, sharp yet heavy with exhaustion and simmering anger, tracked every movement beyond the fence line with tense vigilance. This dog's name was Max. Max. Once more than just a dog, he had been Evan's closest companion, his unwavering best friend. Wherever Evan went, Max was never far behind. The two shared a bond so deep that it seemed unbreakable. Evan had received Max as a birthday gift from his father, Mr. Grayson, a man among the wealthiest in the nation. But no fortune could purchase the one thing Mr. Grayson desired most. The health and life of his son. Evan was gone now, not by some sudden accident, but by the slow, cruel hand of a rare illness that drained him painfully day after day. Mr. Grayson spared no expense, flying in medical specialists from across the globe, trying every available treatment and even financing experimental cures that had yet to be proven. But despite all the money and resources at his disposal, nothing could halt the inevitable. When Evan finally passed, a piece of Max shattered along with him. Since that day, the dog had changed. Once loyal and gentle, he became volatile and distant. Trainers, handlers, and even longtime friends found themselves on the receiving end of his fierce aggression. Max wasn't merely angry. He was drowning in grief, fiercely guarding the last connection he had to Evan. In a desperate move to reclaim even a sliver of what was lost, Mr. Grayson put forth a staggering offer: $1 million to anyone brave enough to approach Max and bring him back from his isolation. Meanwhile, miles away from the sprawling Grayson estate, life surged forward in relentless noise and motion. City streets buzzed with blaring horns and shouting street vendors. Amid the chaos, a small boy weaved carefully between the traffic, carrying a grimy cloth in his hand, wiping windshields with practiced motions in hopes of earning a few spare coins. His name was Eli. No one was quite sure if he was 12 or maybe 13. Even he didn't really know. The streets had been his home for as long as memory served, nights spent curled up behind gas stations, under bridges, and inside battered cardboard boxes during harsh winters. His clothes hung loose and threadbare on his slender frame, and his worn sneakers were more holes than fabric. Hunger gnawed at his stomach constantly, but it was a familiar companion. What was unfamiliar that morning was a flicker of hope. The day began like so many others. Eli moved from car to car, stopped at a red light, offering quick windshield wipes and a soft, polite please, hoping for a few coins in return. As he polished the glass of an old pickup truck, he caught fragments of conversation from two men on the nearby sidewalk. "You hear about the Grayson dog? Still won't let anyone near him. Yeah, even the last trainer ended up with stitches. They say the owner's offering $1 million now, $1 million for a dog." Eli froze for a moment. $1 million. For a dog? Dog he didn't even realize he had stopped wiping until the driver shouted at him to move that night, curled under a rusted awning behind an auto shop. Ellie couldn't sleep. He stared up at the flickering streetlight above, listening to passing trucks and stray dogs barking in the distance. A dog no one could touch, a man with too much money and $1 million challenge. It wasn't the money that stirred something in Eli. It was the idea that maybe, just maybe, he could bait one to reach the unreachable. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Eli stood on the edge of the city, his dirty backpack slung over one shoulder, and an empty water bottle in hand. He didn't have a map or even a full idea of where the Grayson estate was. All and was a direction a name he'd heard mentioned at a gas station, and a stubborn little voice in his head that whispered, "Go." He asked around, most people ignored him. One gas station clerk, tired and gruff, finally answered with, "Ask off out past the bridge. Keep walking till you see nothing but dust, but that ain't a place for kids." Eli did arg, he just nodded, muttered, "A quiet, thank you," and kept moving. The city gave way to cracked roads, and those roads gave way to dirt. The landscape changed gray, turned to dry browns, and buildings turned into wire fences and sunburned fields. His feet ached, his throat dried. Every few miles he'd find a spigot or a ditch where he could drink her, someone's discarded sandwich crushed, could chew on. He walked for hours under the punishing sun. There were moments when he wanted to stop, lie down in the dust and just sleep, but something kept pushing him forward, something more than money, more than curiosity. It was the quiet thought that maybe I could reach this dog, someone might finally see him. Finally, as the sky began to bleed orange and purple, he saw it in the distance, a wide wooden gate, 2 security guards at the entrance, and far beyond it the silhouette of a sprawling estate. He had arrived barely, but he had arrived. The wooden gate towered above Eli, its metal hinges rusted but sturdy. 2 security guards leaned against the posts, arms crossed, watching the boy approach with tired suspicion. Eli stepped a few feet away, heart pounding but face steady. "Can I speak to Mergrison?" he asked quietly. The guards exchanged a look, then burst out laughing. "You serious?" one of them said. "What's a street kid like you want with Mergrison?" "I want to see Max," Eli replied. That earned a louder laugh. "You and the rest of the country go home, kid. This ain't a shelter." But Eli didn't leave. He stood there until nightfall, hoping someone would change their mind. No one did. The next morning he came back, and the next, and the one after that. Each time he asked the same thing, each time was turned away. He slept in the tall grass off the side of the road, covering him with his thin jacket. When the nights turned cold, he drank from Ashlow Creek nearby, and when the hunger became too sharp to ignore, he chewed slowly on the dry crust of bread an older worker had left for him. Without a word, on a rock near the fence by Thefworth, day one of the guards, Fenella muttered under his breath, "That kid still here? What does he think this is, some fairy tale?" But another guard, older and quieter, finally gave in. Mergrison stood by the window of his studio, half-drunk, cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept well again. Sleep, like peace, had become something distant since Evan's passing. Every night thought about all the things hadn't due in time, all the things his money couldn't fix. A quiet knock at the door broke the silence. One of the guards stepped in, eyes slightly lowered. "Sir, there's a boy outside, been coming here for 4 days, says he wants to help Max." Grayson didn't respond right away. Has simply set the cup down and walked past man without a word. Out by the gate, Eli stood with dirt on his jeans and dust on his cheeks. He looked small, too small to be speaking about a dog like Max. Grayson approached slowly, his presence enough to quiet the wind. Hesitated the boy's torn shoes, the way his shins were clenched behind his back, the stillness in his eyes. "It was you coming here every day?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate. "Yes, sir." "And what exactly do you want?" "I want to help Max," Eli said, voice soft but certain. One of the guards snorted. "Grayson, didn't know you know how dangerous he is." "Yes, sir, but I know how to get close without scaring them." That last sentence struck something in Grayson, not pity, not doubt, something quieter. "Where do you live?" "On street," Eli replied. "Since I was little." Grayson looked at the boy for what felt like an eternity, then finally spoke. "All right, Eli, if you want it badly, you'll get your chance tomorrow morning early. Be at the training pen, but remember this, if that dog hurts you, no one here will bear responsible. You understand?" "Yes, sir." That night Eli lay near the fence under Thester's, a threadbare blanket tucked around his shoulders. Cold air bit at his skin, but inside he felt something quiet, liberating, hope, fear, and the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found a place to belong on the balcony of the main house. Mr. Grayson lit a cigarette and stared into the night deep, and thought he didn't understand why he had said yes, but something about the boy stirred a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Something in Eli's eyes and the way Hested reminded him of Evan. The sun had barely crept over the hills when Illy arrived at the pen. The morning was quiet, almost still, but the air carried a weight to it like even the sky was holding its breath. He wore a protective vest now too big for his small frame. The sleeves of the bite suit dragging near his wrists, one of the handlers had helped him put it on without saying much, just a nod, just a quiet pat on fess holder. Mr. Grayson stood by the gate, arms crossed, watching everything like amen, preparing for something he didn't want to see. Stay close, he told his staff. If it goes bad, you step in fast. No. Near the gate opened with a heavy-grown Max came in like a storm, ear-spinned, fur-bristling, breath loud. Head and bark he didn't need to, his body sated. All his grief had sharpened into suspicion, and his rage was always just below the surface. He snapped at the air for no reason, pawed at the dirt like something was crawling under his skin. He jerked his head at every sudden sound as if the whole world was trying to hurt them. They unclipped the leash and stepped back. Max moved instantly, circling, pacing, nostrils flaring, his muscles coiled with tension, his eyes scanning for threat and fear. In the middle of it all stood Ellie. Didn't speak, he didn't flinch, he just stood there, quiet, grounded, like the world hadn't tried to break him 1,000 times before. Max circled on so fast twice. On the third pass something shifted, and then he looked at Eli. Really looked. Something passed between them, quiet, invisible, but real in the boy's eyes. Max didn't see fear, he didn't see pity either. What he saw was something deeper. Hope, effort, a stubborn will to keep standing. Something about that gaze stirred a memory that had been buried beneath grief and rage. It wasn't just familiar, it was personal. It was Evan Thiessen. Look Evan gave him in those final weeks when his hands were weak, but his spirit wasn't. When the doctors whispered outside his room and the world felt colder every day, but Evan never gave in it to pain, not to fear. That same fire no flickered in Eli. Max blinked, and the growl in his throat faded. His tail stopped twitching, his body softened just barely, but enough. Something cracked, not loudly, not with drama, just a hairline fracture through the wall Max had built around himself. Eli, sensing the shift, slowly sank to the ground, cross-legged, calm. He didn't try to reach out, hadn't speak loudly. He just picked up a handful of dirt and let it fall from his fingers. I used to do this whenever I felt lonely or sad, he murmured. It made me feel like I was still part of the world. Max watched, then slowly, first one ear perked forward, then his head tilted, his chest rose and fell with deeper breaths. His paws stopped digging into the earth. His stance loosened, the tension melted inch by inch. He didn't know why, but the boy's voice Maddie something ache in a different way, and then he began to move step by step, slow and careful, no growl, no threat, just accurate decision to come closer. Max came to Eli's side and stood still, watching, waiting. Eli slowly lifted a hand, giving Max time to pull away, but Max didn't. His fingers brushed the dog's shoulder, then his neck, a gentle stroke, so slow, so sacred, as if touching something broken and holy. For Max, the boy's touch didn't feel like a stranger's. It felt like Evan, like you wash her again. Just for a moment, and in that small space of silence, Max chose not to look away for a long while. No one said a word. From the edge of the pen, workers stood frozen, some with mouths slightly open, others with hands pressed to their chests as if they'd witnessed something they couldn't explain. Mr. Grayson had moved. His arms remained crossed, but his chest felt tighter than it had in Yersh's face. Usually carved in stone, cracked not from age, but from something softer, disbelief, awe, and the ache of a memory. Thought he'd buried. Max remained still, pressed lightly against Eli's side, cam present, quiet. The boy slowly stood, brushing dust from his pants, and walked toward the gate, Max following without command. When Eli reached the fence, Murgrayson met him there. His voice low, steady, but laced with something deeper. You did it, he said. No tricks, no force, just you. I said, $1 million to anyone who could reach him. That offer still stands. The money's yours. Eli looked down for a moment, lips pressed together, then he raised his eyes again. Clear, honest, unwavering. I don't want the money, sir. Grayson's brow tightened. What do you mean? You earned it. Yowd Servant Eli shifted his weight, glanced briefly at Max, then back at the man. I wanted to ask for something else, if that's okay. Grayson gave a small nod, curious. Now go ahead, I just want a room to sleep in. Eli said someplace warm where no one tells me to leave 2 meals a day, maybe a school if that's not too much. Silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Grayson stared at the boy as if seeing something the world had long ignored. Then finally, he exhaled slow, deeply. That's all you want, yes sir? Mr. Grayson didn't speak right away. He looked at Eli for a long time. Really looked not at the dust on his clothes or frayed edges of his sleeves, but at steadiness in his voice, the strength in his stillness. He nodded. All right, Eli, he said softly. You'll stay here in the main house. There's a room we can fix up, and starting tomorrow you'll eat with me. Eli didn't smile, not out outright, but because part of him still didn't know how. Instead, he simply nodded back with the same quiet dignity he had shown from the very beginning. That night, slept in a real bed for the first time in years. The mattress was firm, fib blanket too warm, and for a moment, the comfort felt almost unfamiliar. Max lay curled at the foot of the bed, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Hadn't left Eli's side since the moment he walked out of the pen the next morning. Mr. Grayson personally called a school in town and began the paperwork. Didn't delegate it, he didn't pass it off to staff because something about that boy had reached a place in him that money never could. Over the days that followed, the house changed. It wasn't louder, but it was no longer silent. Max now wagged his tail instead of growling. Ellie spoke more, and Mr. Grayson, thoughtful guarded, found himself lingering longer at the breakfast table. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Grayson stood on the front porch and watched Eli and Max play in the tall grass. Max bounded freely. Eli laughed, really laughed. It was a sound the man hadn't heard in this place since Evan was alive. He stepped down from the porch, walked toward the man, placed a hand gently on Ellie's shoulder. You have something rare, he said quietly. I've seen people try to control others with force, but what you have, it's not force, it's presence, calm, and that's worth more than any money. Max stood beside them, head high, eyes soft, an infant moment. Under the soft orange sky, something broken had been made wholly gain, not just in the dog, not just in the boy, but in the man who had once believed nothing could ever heal.